We are just days away from E3, and honestly I could not be more excited. While E3 gets a lot of criticism directed towards it, and a lot of it is very valid, I still feel like without E3 last year, things felt pretty hollow. I love having a few days that are directly about announcing games and updating recently announced games as well. It's also just a fun time. It's a free event about video games. I really love it each year. Even if it's not very great, it's still fun to sit down and watch events about video games. Today I'm going to be talking about my hopes and dreams for E3, and while a lot of this stuff might not even happen, and some of the stuff is pretty much almost improbable to happen, I still think it'd be fun to go through a lot of the stuff that I would want and hope for this year's E3.
Jesus Christ.
A Breath of the Wild 2 release date. This is something that a lot of people really want, and as a massive fan of the Legend of Zelda series, and as someone who has been impacted greatly by the Legend of Zelda series, of course I'm incredibly excited about the sequel to Breath of the Wild, which we don't even know what it's called, but it's just kind of easier to call it Breath of the Wild 2 right now. Personally, it would be really cool to see a release date for this or a release window. Now, with the recent rumors about the Nintendo Switch Pro, and the rumors this time actually being more substantiated than they were before, this would be a no-brainer for a launch title for the new console. They launched the Nintendo Switch with Breath of the Wild because it just made sense, and Zelda is such a big franchise for Nintendo, and Breath of the Wild is the highest-selling Zelda game of all time. It just makes sense for them to announce a release date for this. Now, will they do it? I have no idea. I'm not going to sit here and go, that's going to happen. But what I will say is this, I would love it if it did. At the start of this year, we got The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword announced for the Nintendo Switch. It's going to be a HD 60fps remaster for the newer Nintendo console. Now, me personally, it is my favorite Zelda game of all time, so I was incredibly excited for this. But honestly, I can see a lot of people waiting for the other Zelda games to get an announcement as well. Now, out of all of the Zelda games that I love dearly, I think that any of them could be next and I would be happy. But if I'm thinking about the next remaster that I would love to see on the Switch, it's honestly Wind Waker. Wind Waker's a game that I've wanted to revisit for a while, and even though I can open up my Wii U copy anytime I want, it still would be cool for people that never owned a Wii U or people that never owned the original version of this game to be able to play this game on a modern console as well, with the modern features updated in this game too. This is a game that honestly is pretty, no matter what resolution it is, but updating it to be even prettier is something that I can't even fathom. I would love to see this game. Now, honestly, the biggest hope and dream would that it would be a collection of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker together, but I just don't see that happening with the way that Nintendo is doing stuff right now. But I would love to see Wind Waker be announced for a HD remaster. Of course, Twilight Princess later on in the year as well. The Tekken Collection. My childhood. Now, I had this idea for a while, and I don't think they'll actually do it, but that's why this is kind of hopes and dreams. The idea of having a collection of Tekken games would be, honestly, one of the most exciting things ever. Now, personally, like everything, almost everything in this list, I look over on my shelf right now and I see every single Tekken game ever made on my shelf right now. Every single one of them. I see them all, from Tekken 1 to Tekken Tag Tournament 2 to Tekken 6 to Tekken 7. I have all of those games somewhere, either on my shelf or on my systems or somewhere in my house. I have every single one of those games. But that doesn't mean I don't want other people to see these games as well. And it doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to have them all in one place as well to just easily access them whenever I wanted to play them. Now, how this would work is you would have the PS1 collection, the PS2 collection, and the PS3 collection. You're probably like, Calvin, why not just have them all in one collection? Here's the answer. These dreams are dreams, but at the same time, I'm thinking about them from a company perspective as well. We can make a lot of money here, Bandai Namco, as well. You know what I mean? You could make a lot of money with this as well. The PS1 collection would consist of Tekken 1, Tekken 2, and Tekken 3. The PS2 collection would consist of Tekken Tag Tournament, which is freaking amazing. Tekken 4, which is my favorite Tekken game of all time. and in my top 10 favorite games of all time, and Tekken 5. Then the PS3 collection, or I guess the newer gen collection, I guess you wouldn't really call it the PS3 collection because it was also on Xbox, is Tekken Tag Tournament 2, and you would also have Tekken 6. And of course, Tekken 7 is already on modern console, so that wouldn't actually be an issue whatsoever. Now, in terms of online functionality, I think the coolest thing about this would be that you could definitely do online for Tekken 3, Tekken 5, and Tekken Tag Tournament. Now, and for the PS3 games as well, but I don't think you could really do online for the other games, and the reason being is that Tekken 1 and 2, I don't think would be very fun online. I think it would be fun for like a joke, but I don't think it would be very competitive. I'm not saying they shouldn't get online, but I'm saying that I feel like they're kind of stiffer than other Tekken games. Tekken 4 is my favorite Tekken game of all time. I like most Tekken games, I know the story off by heart in those games. I know everyone's individual journey from start to finish. It's one of my favorite franchises ever. But it would be still really cool to see that game remastered. But again, the versus gameplay in that game is not ideal. It's one of the reasons why it got so critically panned, is because it's very not fun for a competitive setting because of the uneven terrain and the way battles go sometimes with that. You can win a match not because of skill, but sometimes because the terrain blocks you, or you get knocked on a few stairs, or someone can kick you on a staircase, but you can't kick them. It's all this like weird functionality. Single player, it's amazing. Multiplayer, it leaves a little bit to be desired, but I still think that would be good as a remaster.
A bizarre incident occurred in the outskirts of an American suburb called Raccoon City. It was later revealed that the terrible disaster had been caused by the T virus.
Again, another remaster, the Resident Evil Collection. At the start of this year, I had a very big scare that the Resident Evil games are going to be delisted forever. Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, and Resident Evil 3 are 3 games that are iconic and have really kickstarted, in my not in my opinion, it's kind of almost like just true, kickstarted the survival horror genre. They were one of the main reasons why we have so many of those games nowadays that have those type of puzzles, those types of hallways, those types of like atmosphere, are because of what those 3 games did for the horror genre and for the action genre as well when it comes to Resident Evil 3. Those iconic games were almost delisted at the start of the year because Sony were going to take down the PS3 and the Vita stores. But now looking back at this, game preservation is so important to me. It's a thing that honestly I feel like should be more important to everybody, and I didn't realize it fully, and that's my mistake, until Sony announced they were delisting those games. Having all 3 of those games in one place to play would be amazing. Now, I think one of the things that Capcom hopefully doesn't think, but I think they might think, is that, well, we remade 1, 2, and 3, so we don't need to ever look back at these old games. But they're so different, especially 2 and 3 is so different to the actual remakes of the games. And I think that, while I think the remakes are better in terms of gameplay, I don't think that anyone can argue that the original Resident Evil 3 and the original Resident Evil 2 are so much better in other ways as well. And that's not me being like a purist or like a gatekeeper being like, the original games did it better. I think both the remake and the originals do things better against each other. You know what I mean? But I still would like to see these games fully remastered in some way. Persona 2, Persona 3, and Persona 4 collections, or separately, I don't mind whatsoever what way they're ported to every single system they can be. This is another one that is definitely for friends more than myself, because I personally can, as I say, with all of these remasters and collections I've mentioned, and pretty much all of them, like, for sure, like, I literally played Persona 3 the other day, I finished Persona 4 too many times to count on my Vita. I can play Persona 2 whenever I want as well. But this is a few games that every time someone mentions Persona 5 to me or has finished Persona 5 to me, including, you know, a close personal friend recently, would ask, where do I play Persona 3? What is the best way to play it? And I would love so desperately to just be like, download it off your PlayStation, buddy. Download it off your Switch. And I think that's just one of the most exciting things about this series. It's an amazing series with some amazing stories and amazing characters and amazing music. And more people should be able to play those games before Persona 6 comes out, and it will be coming out, I know, in the next few years. it'd be just cool to see more from the Persona franchise, especially with some reference to the older games as well, that definitely deserve it.
The legacy of the crystals has shaped our history.
A lot of the stuff on this list is ports or remasters, just because I just love, like, replaying games that I played before. But also, I really would like to see something from Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy is another franchise that I love dearly and have loved dearly for years. Ever since I was a little kid, it was the series that really taught me that games could be something more than just what I was playing before, which was a lot of like sports games, like wrestling games, which are still great. But it was really cool to see like what games could really do when I played Final Fantasy X and then 12 afterwards. And of course, all the Final Fantasy games I played since then have been so superb and amazing and have all their own unique spin on the actual tales of Final Fantasy. But seeing a release date from Final Fantasy 16, probably one of my most anticipated games ever, would also be pretty cool. And that game I'm predicting is very far along, due to the fact that we've seen a lot of late game dungeons and a lot of like really big set pieces from the game. It makes sense that we're really far along at this point in the development. Elden Ring.
No, don't! Hand over the mirror. Or else, your son.
Shenmue IV is something that I have been clamoring for a while now. Shenmue 3 is a game that was very divisive amongst a lot of Shenmue fans, but for me personally, I found myself really loving it and enjoying it and finding myself really just enjoying it throughout the whole game. Now, I totally look at the rating for the actual game itself. I think it's at like 68 or something right now on Metacritic, and it's like, that's fair. It had a lot of issues, it had a lot of like technical issues, it had a lot of really weird glitches, so that makes sense. But that doesn't change the fact that I love the game and want to see where the story goes with these characters. It's something that I know that the creators of the games and the writers of the game and the developers of the games really think that it's going to be going on for 6 games, so it's not even ending with Shenmue 4, but I really still need to see a conclusion for this, no matter how low budget it gets, no matter how much little support it gets from the fans. For me personally, my hopes and dreams that Yu Suzuki gets to make another Shenmue game, at least one more, just so we can see something from this game, because we can't end it on that cliffhanger again. It can't be another cliffhanger from these amazing, superb games that have really changed video games forever, but don't get the credit for changing video games with how they freaking made those beautiful open world games and like made the first open world game back all those years ago. And last but definitely not least, I would love to see another Ueda game, a familiar Ueda game announced. Now, his newer game is definitely going to be lower budget than it was the previous games, because we're at a stage with Ueda where, although his games are iconic, and to me are the greatest games, some of the greatest games ever made, Shadow of the Colossus, one of his probably most popular game, is my favorite game of all time. It still doesn't make sense that I don't think he'll be getting the massive budget that he got before, especially since Last Guardian took over like 10 years, even longer, to make and get out to the public. Of course, that wasn't the full time of being developed. There was stuff that happened in between that, but still, I don't see the game getting that much of a budget. And here's the reason I'm talking about budget is because I think now Ueda is going to be doing what he does best, is focusing on the creative aspects of the video game, focusing on the aspects of video game that makes his video games amazing, and that is that they're so unique and so special to his style. Nobody's really able to emulate it. So many times people will say to me, oh, this game's like a Shadow of the Colossus or Ico, and I play it, I'm like, this is nothing like a Ueda game. He has his own stamp on his games that are all so special, creating his own languages for his games, his own cultures. He does such good storytelling with just visuals and movements and actions and facial expressions. There's rarely ever even like dialogue in his games. There is dialogue, but it's like usually saved for like really crazy moments that don't even like move the story along crazy amounts, but it's usually just like This is the language I've created. We're not going to use it all the time. You piece together the story through the visuals and everyone is right. And that's what I love about Ueda. He's my favorite director across all media, and I just want another game from him. I don't care if it's a 2D game. I don't care if it's a 3D game. I don't care if it's a game that you have to like make yourself. I just want something from Ueda. I will say one game that I didn't mention here, one franchise I didn't mention here, and probably I'm not going to put it in the actual hopes part of this video, is Silent Hill, and that's just because I'm worried about who might be developing it. It's a very distinct game that it's very worrying to think about who could be the person that takes up that mantle. I don't think anyone can really do Silent Hill as amazingly as Team Silent did back in the day. Now, also, the guys who were from Team Silent went on and made such amazing things. Like the original developer Silent Hill went on to make Gravity Rush and Siren as well. So anything from him would be amazing too, but I'm not going to put it in the official hopes thing because it's something that I'm very worried about. Even though I love Silent Hill 3, it's one of my favorite games ever. It's still something that I definitely worry about. Guys, tell me what you hope for, and if you're actually excited for E3, because I am very much excited for E3. I will be reacting to the Nintendo press conference. That's probably the only one I will be reacting to, but we'll see, just because it's the one that like I'm most excited for. I hope that we do get some really cool announcements, and it's just a fun time. And you can always tweet at me in the description below is my Twitter, or you can talk to me in Discord and tell me about what you're thinking about E3 at the moment. Literally, you can just add me and be like, hey, I really love this E3 conference. You know, this was really fun, and we can have a chat about it. I have no problem doing that. I'll see you guys very soon. Bye-bye.